From the edge of the void, I first saw them. Humans, creatures of fragile flesh and tentative movements, clustered upon a blue-green sphere, their cities small and haphazard in comparison to the sprawling constructs of the apex. We, in our infinite vantage, had catalogued countless species, dissected civilizations, and calculated the trajectories of empires. Yet, for all our precision, the humans seemed negligible, soft, disorganized, inconsequential. Our initial reports dismissed them, slow, limited, predictable. The Apex Council laughed at the notion that such a species could pose any threat. Still, I could not. There was a rhythm to their movements that defied randomness, a subtle pulse in their coordination that caught the eye if one looked closely enough. Their hands moved with deliberate purpose, not chaotic flailing. Their eyes, tiny, unarmored, unremarkable, burned with a quiet, steady intensity, as if the universe itself whispered secrets they alone could hear. When our reconnaissance vessels first penetrated their atmosphere, the humans did not scatter. They did not panic. Instead, they adapted. Crude barricades, traps fashioned from local materials, and movements timed with uncanny foresight slowed our probes. They anticipated the probe's paths before sensors could detect them. They used rivers, forests, and jagged cliffs not as obstacles, but as instruments, shields, snares, and weapons against entities far beyond their apparent capacity. I recorded every instance, unable to reconcile it with our assessments. Amid the throng, one human drew my attention. At first glance, they were unremarkable. Slight stature, no armaments beyond a rudimentary device, face obscured beneath a hood. Yet each step radiated a subtle menace. The human's gestures, barely perceptible, guided others with silent authority. Their presence shaped the flow of entire squads, their decisions invisible to our instruments, yet decisive in outcome. Our algorithms ignored them. Analysts scoffed.
I could not. The Apex Council dismissed warnings, declaring the reports anomalous, overzealous. And yet I felt it, a creeping unease at the edge of observation. In a galaxy measured by firepower and dominion, the most dangerous adversary often carries no signature of threat. The overlooked human, unarmed, underestimated, would soon intersect with our forces, and when that moment arrived, nothing would remain predictable. A shiver ran through the void. The human moved among their people, unnoticed, yet fully aware. I leaned closer, my sensors straining, knowing that the quietest presence often casts the longest shadow. The outer colonies sprawled beneath us, distant outposts of civilizations we assumed malleable, waiting to bend to our dominion. Our ships descended like iron birds, precise and overwhelming, expecting swift compliance. Yet from my vantage above the war-torn landscapes, I witnessed something that unsettled even my analytical mind. Humans resisted. Not with force equal to ours, they could not, but with a cunning that made each strike feel preordained, each maneuver both deliberate and ephemeral. They moved like shadows along cragged ridges, vanished into forests before we could deploy retaliation, and returned in ways that defied expectation. Every settlement became a labyrinth of ingenuity. Rivers redirected, boulders rigged as barricades, ruined buildings re-engineered as watchtowers and traps. I observed their improvisations with fascination, noting how terrain itself seemed to respond to their presence, transformed into a living extension of their will. The humans anticipated the flow of engagement, predicting not just the movement of our forces, but the very rhythm of battle itself. It was as though instinct had been honed into a prophetic intelligence, a capacity to see a few moments into the future and act with unerring precision. And always, the overlooked human was there.
Not leading openly, not commanding with visible authority, yet their influence radiated in subtle ways, gestures, glances, adjustments. A squad would pause, hesitate for a heartbeat, then surge forward with perfect timing, as though guided by a silent conductor. The presence of this one being inspired extraordinary courage, a synchrony that our sensors could not quantify. My fellow observers dismissed it as anecdotal, as coincidence. I could not. Every pulse, every flicker of coordination, every improvised trap spoke of a mind not just aware, but ahead, calculating, bending chaos to its will. We responded with the instruments of our superiority. Drone swarms scoured valleys, siege engines rumbled along the coasts, psychic infiltrators probed their minds. Each effort failed spectacularly. Drones tangled in nets hidden among trees, engines disabled by simple mechanisms that exploited mechanical weaknesses we had not predicted, psychic probes diverted by the humans' raw unpredictability. With each failure, the humans' confidence grew, their resistance hardened. The frontier became a stage of escalating tension, a silent theater of ingenuity versus brute strength. Our algorithms failed to capture the rhythm of their resilience. Even as the Apex Council dismissed my reports, unease rippled beneath their polished veneer. There was something primal in the humans, a stubbornness, a spark of defiance that no calculation could suppress. And within that spark burned the overlooked human, small, unremarkable in appearance, yet central to a pattern we were only beginning to understand. Their defiance was not mere resistance, it was a challenge to hierarchy, to our assumptions of control, to the very notion of predictable dominance. Every encounter, every retreat and advance, every trap sprung upon us was a reminder. The humans we deemed weak were forging a strength we had never measured.
And in the shadows of forests, mountains, and ruined settlements, that one overlooked human moved like a phantom, always present, always shaping outcomes, always unseen until it was too late. As our fleets regrouped, recalibrated, and prepared another strike, I could sense a growing unease among my fellow observers. The frontier itself had become an unpredictable organism, guided by ingenuity, instinct, and the quiet command of one small human whose presence turned chaos into advantage. And in that realization lay a dangerous truth. The Apex Council may control the stars, but we did not control this species. The horizon shimmered with smoke and light from the latest skirmishes, yet I could not turn away. The overlooked human was there, again, and I knew, with a certainty that gnawed at my sensors, that the next encounter would be nothing like we had anticipated. The human's resistance was a tide, and that one human was the current beneath it, unseen, unstoppable, and inexorably pulling us toward an outcome none of us could calculate. The outpost had been a jewel of our dominion, a sentinel perched on the jagged cliffs of that barren world, bristling with automated defenses, shield generators, and squads trained for centuries in the art of control. From orbit, its gleaming towers reflected the cold light of the distant sun, a monument to Apex authority. We expected humans to scatter at our approach, to crumble under the weight of our firepower, and yet what unfolded would shatter every assumption we had ever held. It began with a whisper on our sensors, tiny energy signatures, barely noticeable, moving with intent through the perimeter. At first, our analysts dismissed it, minor scouts, glitches in the array. But the patterns multiplied, converged, and then, like a storm breaking a dam, humans swarmed. Not in chaos, but with an eerie, deliberate precision that made my circuits hum with disbelief. Explosions rippled across the surface, shields flaring as traps sprung. And yet the humans, small, fragile, minimally armed, seemed orchestrated by an unseen hand. I watched the overlooked human at the center of the symphony. They moved with a calm that contradicted the chaos, their eyes scanning, calculating, anticipating every countermeasure before it even activated. Not a leader in the traditional sense, no ranks, no command shouted across comms, no visible authority. Yet every gesture, slight tilts of the head, subtle hand signals, a pause, a glance, channeled the actions of dozens. Dozens became hundreds. Our defensive drones, expecting linear movement, flew straight into ambushes. Our automated turrets fired into empty spaces, only to have humans emerge from behind natural formations and ruins, striking with exactitude. Even as walls erupted, as fires consumed sections of the outpost, the humans' companions moved instinctively, choreographed yet driven by gut instinct. I recorded, unable to reconcile what I saw with any known tactical doctrine. Every feint was perfect. Every withdrawal seemed like surrender, yet led to greater gains. Our commanders, calculated, detached, failed to adapt. Arrogance clouded their perception. They could not see the subtle genius at work, and it was as if the human could bend the battlefield itself to their will. Each breach revealed a new layer of ingenuity. Barricades were not just obstacles, but levers. Rubble became traps.
Machinery was repurposed in real time to serve defense and offense simultaneously. The overlooked human anticipated our counters, predicting deployments, exploiting blind spots, turning our technological superiority into vulnerability. It was not force that commanded the engagement, it was foresight, creativity, and audacity intertwined with human instinct. I observed the human rally others, not through orders, but through presence alone.
Entire units paused mid-assault, synchronized instinctively, coordinating without vocalization, without signals. I traced their steps, a turn here, a hand motion there, a fleeting eye contact, and the tide of skirmishes shifted. Fear and determination fused into a singular entity, a force that no simulation could replicate. Where we saw weakness, I recorded strategy. Where we saw disorder, I detected vision. And then it became undeniable. The human was more than an agent. They were a catalyst. Their actions reverberated far beyond the immediate battlefield. Reports streamed in. Scattered settlements coordinated defensive maneuvers. Previously isolated enclaves improvised countermeasures. Populations, previously inert under apex dominion, rose in subtle, synchronized defiance. What we interpreted as luck, randomness, or coincidence was a contagion of ingenuity, spreading through the species like wildfire. The Apex Council's analysts called it improbable. I called it evolution. The overlooked human had awakened something latent in their species, an adaptive intelligence, a creativity honed in struggle, a capacity to convert limitation into advantage. And I watched, powerless, as entire strategies designed over centuries unraveled under the influence of one small, unarmored, insignificant human. By the time the dust settled, towers smoking and machinery silent, the human stood amidst the ruins, slight, ordinary in every metric we had devised, yet unmistakably commanding the outcome of entire engagements with nothing but presence, foresight, and will. I realized then that the human was not just a participant in this war, they were a fulcrum upon which the trajectory of their species turned. A low tremor of unease spread through our fleet. The Apex Council huddled in disbelief, unable to process the scale of the disruption. The humans we had dismissed, underestimated, and overlooked were anything but weak. And the overlooked human, the one whose presence we barely noted, had proven that a single spark could ignite a wildfire of ingenuity, resilience, and defiance. As night fell over the outpost, smoke curling into the alien sky, I could feel it, the quiet, inexorable weight of inevitability. This human, unnoticed yet pivotal, would not stop here. Their trajectory was set, and the universe itself would have to reckon with the consequences. A storm was coming, and I, observer from the void, could only watch and chronicle, knowing the apex of human ingenuity had only begun to reveal itself. From orbit, I observed the frontier, a theater of calculated chaos, scarred by repeated confrontations. Our forces, once confident in their supremacy, had doubled, then tripled their fleets converging with mechanical precision to subdue the humans. But each engagement only revealed deeper layers of resistance, more intricate than our predictive models could fathom. What had once been isolated skirmishes escalated into a symphony of defiance, and at the center of every movement, I saw the overlooked human. No longer a solitary figure, they had become a focal point, a nucleus around which human determination crystallized. Their presence shaped the flow of engagements, as if they were conducting an orchestra of chaos. I watched, fascinated and alarmed, as they anticipated our strategies, exploiting the slightest predictable patterns. Every deployment we calculated in advance became an opportunity for the humans to invert, disrupt, or repurpose our own superior technology. Turrets malfunctioned, drones fell into traps we had never anticipated, and even the most advanced warships, designed to pulverize entire cities, faltered against improvised countermeasures orchestrated with uncanny foresight. The humans adapted in real time. They repurposed alien weaponry, converting containment fields into barriers, grav lifts into launching points, and energy conduits into defensive traps.
They moved fluidly across terrain that should have impeded them. Jagged cliffs became cover, narrow canyons funneled our forces into ambushes, and rivers slowed mechanized units while offering them unexpected mobility. Each encounter revealed ingenuity, resilience, and creativity in proportions that no protocol could predict. I recorded patterns, noting the subtle interplay of instinct and strategy.
Where our calculations assumed linear responses, humans executed nonlinear maneuvers, anticipating consequences we had not yet imagined. Their defiance was relentless, cumulative, and it spread across the battlefield like a contagion. Soldiers who witnessed their peers' coordinated improvisations adopted tactics on the fly, each human movement amplifying the collective capacity to resist. The overlooked human became a psychological weapon as much as a tactical one. Their reputation preceded them before they even arrived, whispered among allies, feared by adversaries. Our commanders, confident and detached, faltered under the weight of unpredictability. Confidence gave way to hesitation, hesitation to fear. Plans once deemed infallible unraveled line by line, strategy by strategy, until even our warship's superior firepower seemed inert against ingenuity coupled with sheer willpower. Even minor engagements reverberated like shocks through our hierarchy. Our attempts to isolate the overlooked human failed repeatedly. They were everywhere and nowhere, simultaneously guiding operations and inspiring improvisation. Our psychic probes, designed to anticipate and disrupt, encountered resistance they could not penetrate. It was not just intelligence, it was creativity, courage, and adaptability fused into action. Each move, each counter, each innovation only deepened the unease in my sensors. Whispers of dread echoed through the Apex Council channels.
Analysts argued, recalculated, and recalibrated, but every new dataset reinforced the same conclusion. Humans, particularly the overlooked one, were beyond our models. They were cunning, inventive, and unrelenting. Even when surrounded, outnumbered, or outgunned, they turned adversity into advantage, often using our expectations against us. A trap meant for them became a trap for us. A strategy designed to overwhelm became a stage for human ingenuity to shine. I documented every moment, every subtle gesture, every improvised maneuver. I noted how the overlooked human's influence radiated outward, inspiring allies, confounding enemies, and subtly dictating the rhythm of engagements across multiple fronts. Our fleet's synchronized assaults fell into disarray, our battle plans fractured into improvisation after improvisation, forced to react rather than dictate. Fear, awe, and reluctant admiration mixed in the ranks, and I sensed the slow erosion of morale among even our most seasoned officers. The humans exploited more than our technology. They exploited our psychology. Our soldiers hesitated, expecting deceit and finding it. Our commanders recalculated and faltered under uncertainty. The overlooked human's presence was intangible, yet omnipresent, a force field of influence bending the tide of conflict. I had cataloged countless species, yet none had ever demonstrated such a synthesis of intuition, strategy, and sheer will. As the battles escalated, a new realization spread through our fleets like wildfire. This was no longer a skirmish or a rebellion. What began as a minor anomaly, a single human operating at the edge of perception, had evolved into an existential challenge. Humanity, previously dismissed, now forced us to question the very foundation of superiority. Every failure, every misstep, every unexpected turn was a lesson etched painfully into our calculations. From my perch in the void, I saw the overlooked human move among their forces like a phantom.
Slight, unremarkable by our metrics, yet commanding through presence alone. Their gaze measured the battlefield, their minds seemed to anticipate ours, and every action catalyzed not just immediate victories, but shifts in morale, coordination, and strategy. Even as explosions shook the terrain below, the humans' focus remained unshaken, and I realized that the Apex Council's perception of control was an illusion. The frontier had become unpredictable, a crucible of ingenuity versus power. Our superior numbers, weapons, and technology were tested against something beyond calculation. The overlooked human had become the axis upon which the future of this sector pivoted, and with each engagement, I felt the undeniable truth growing. Humanity's resilience, guided by one we had dismissed, was reshaping the rules of war itself. And as the sun dipped below the horizon of the scarred world, casting long shadows over shattered fortifications and smoldering war machines, I knew with certainty that the Apex Council's next move would not merely be resisted, it would be anticipated, manipulated, and ultimately undone.
The overlooked human, now more than ever, was no longer a single agent. They were the embodiment of humanity's unpredictability. The shockwave of their presence spread across every system, and I could only watch, record, and wait. For the next encounter would not be a battle. It would be a reckoning. From orbit, the Central Command gleamed like a fortress of calculated precision. The Apex Council's nerve center, a nexus of strategy, communication, and overwhelming firepower, had long been untouchable, a symbol of unchallenged supremacy. We believed our dominance unassailable. And yet, in that calm before the storm, I felt the faint tremor of inevitability. Something was moving, something we had underestimated, and I knew without comprehension that the overlooked human would define the coming hours. The offensive began subtly.
Small signals flickered across the command arrays. Interceptions, minor anomalies, isolated sabotage. Analysts assumed routine glitches until entire communication nodes failed simultaneously, and our defensive drones malfunctioned in unison. The humans, against every logical expectation, had penetrated the perimeter, not with brute force, but through orchestration that rivaled the sophistication of our own systems. I focused on the overlooked human, watching as they navigated the chaos with uncanny intuition. They did not lead from a high vantage, did not issue commands through comms, yet every move guided the flow of the assault, converting uncertainty into strategy. Elite Apex units, veterans trained for centuries, armed with precision weapons, shielded by centuries of tactical innovation, advanced toward the human incursions. They anticipated simple resistance, easy targets, but the human moved fluidly among allies and adversaries alike, exploiting every opening, predicting responses before they were executed. Entire squads fell into traps engineered with instinctive foresight, ambushes where our best units found themselves countered at every turn. I recorded each miscalculation with a rising sense of alarm. Our superiority was unraveling, thread by calculated thread, before a single decisive blow had even been struck. And yet it was not mere tactical brilliance that set the human apart. I perceived something deeper, ineffable. Amid the smoke, the rubble, and the echoes of battle, there was a motion guiding their hand. Humans fight not only to survive, but to uphold principles alien to us: loyalty, honor, compassion. Their courage was a current that ran beneath the surface, shaping allies and undermining foes with subtleties our logic could not quantify. The overlooked human became a pivot, a focal point of resilience that spread outward, binding individuals into a collective force that defied prediction. Throughout the siege, every action demonstrated a fusion of instinct and intellect. They exploited psychological weaknesses. Our soldiers hesitated, our commanders recalculated. Every standard operating protocol collapsed under the pressure of unpredictability. Yet the human was never reckless. Each feint, each withdrawal, each bold advance was precise, designed to provoke, disorient, and redirect. I observed as entire battalions of humans moved in tandem, improvising solutions to impossibly complex problems, responding to environmental hazards and technological superiority with ingenuity that surpassed every algorithm in our archives. The battlefield became a living organism, shaped by the human's will. Rubble was repurposed as cover, energy barriers were bypassed, and previously fortified choke points became traps for us. We were playing against a species that had transcended conventional warfare, turning limitation into leverage, chaos into opportunity. From my orbital vantage, I could see the Apex Council falter, their confidence eroding. Discussions, once crisp and decisive, became frantic. Every contingency plan failed to account for the human's intuition. And then the human struck the heart of our central command, not in a blaze of glory, but with precision, efficiency, and a disquieting calm. The very core of our operations, communications, weapons arrays, strategic processors, succumbed not to overwhelming force, but to cunning, adaptation, and insight. In that moment, the overlooked human was no longer an individual. They were the axis around which the balance of power shifted. In the aftermath, as alarms blared and smoke choked the air, I sensed a truth that transcended metrics. Humans are not merely reactive. They shape reality, bend probability, and inspire one another in ways we cannot calculate. Entire populations were already adapting to the fallout of this offensive, coordinating defenses, improvising strategies, and turning fear into ingenuity.
The overlooked human had become a symbol, a spark that catalyzed latent potential across their species. The Apex Council struggled to respond. Our strategies, once infallible, collapsed under the weight of unpredictability and sheer resolve. Fear, admiration, and disbelief coursed through our ranks in equal measure. Even our most advanced warships, armed with overwhelming firepower, were neutralized or misdirected. Every plan, every stratagem, every expectation was invalidated by human creativity, foresight, and courage. Amid the ruin, I focused on the overlooked human, watching as they moved among allies and adversaries with unerring precision. They were not celebrated, not heralded, yet their influence radiated outward, shaping the battlefield in ways no calculation could predict. It was not strength alone that commanded attention. It was presence, ingenuity, and a relentless drive that defied comprehension. As night fell over the devastated command center, fires reflecting off scarred terrain, I could feel the inexorable shift in balance. What we had deemed weakness, the small, fragile, underestimated human, was in fact the crucible of strength. What we had dismissed as folly became innovation. The overlooked human had transformed the very rules of engagement, becoming a herald of humanity's ascendancy. They were no longer an anomaly, no longer a mere participant. They were the fulcrum upon which the fate of multiple worlds now pivoted. And from my orbital vantage, I realized with uneasy clarity, the Apex Council had not merely been challenged, they had been outmaneuvered by ingenuity, by will, and by the quiet, unstoppable force of a species we had misunderstood for far too long. The turning point had arrived, and it carried with it a truth we could neither ignore nor undo. The battlefield fell silent for a moment, a pause pregnant with the weight of inevitability.
The overlooked human stood amidst it all, unarmored, uncelebrated, yet undeniably central to every outcome. I recorded this truth, knowing that what we had witnessed in these hours would reverberate across generations. Humanity, led by one we had overlooked, had begun to define the terms of war itself. And I, observer from the void, could only watch, knowing the next move would not be ours, but theirs. From the cold vantage of the void, I have observed countless species across countless worlds, catalogued their strengths, calculated their limitations, and predicted the outcomes of innumerable conflicts. Yet among them there exists one variable that defies every formula, every predictive model, every layer of precaution: the overlooked human. Small, unremarkable, seemingly ordinary by every measure we use to judge potential, they carry within them a force no calculation can anticipate, a capacity for adaptation, ingenuity, and relentless persistence that bends reality in ways our sensors cannot quantify. I have watched this human navigate situations that should have been fatal. Fleets 3 times their size converged, weapons designed to obliterate cities fired with perfect accuracy, and yet they emerged unscathed, turning each attempt at annihilation into an opportunity. It is not strength in the conventional sense that defines them. It is presence, perception, and an almost philosophical understanding of risk, timing, and human will. In the midst of overwhelming chaos, they move with calm deliberation, converting disorder into advantage, hesitation into victory, and despair into a catalyst for courage. Their ingenuity is simultaneously tactical and conceptual. Where others see only limitation, insufficient numbers, lack of resources, hostile terrain, they perceive possibility. A river is not an obstacle, it is a trap. A ruined structure is not a hazard, it is a stronghold.
A fractured squad is not vulnerability. It is a swarm guided by instinct, improvisation, and the silent direction of one individual. I have traced the patterns of their maneuvers with every sensor at my disposal, and still the outcomes surprise me. Each engagement, each subtle gesture, each improvisation accumulates into a force multiplier that eclipses conventional measures of power.
From my perspective, the overlooked human has become a lens through which the entire species is magnified. They are not just a soldier or a leader. They are the embodiment of latent potential, a force multiplier that transforms collective effort into extraordinary outcomes. Entire human populations seem to sense it, even when unspoken. In villages, on battlefields, in scattered settlements, coordination and ingenuity ripple outward from their influence, creating a network of adaptive, resilient action that spreads faster than any algorithm can predict. Even now, I perceive the subtle psychological effect their presence imparts. Allies are steadied by proximity, adversaries are unsettled, and every strategic move carries a weight that surpasses measurable metrics. Our attempts to contain, suppress, or anticipate them fail repeatedly. Where we rely on logic, pattern recognition, and overwhelming firepower, they rely on intuition, adaptability, and an uncanny ability to exploit both our expectations and our hubris. It is not merely battlefield efficacy that marks them as extraordinary. The human embodies a principle we struggle to comprehend. The overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed often hold the greatest potential. Across galaxies, across civilizations, it is frequently the smallest, seemingly weakest presence that determines outcomes far beyond their apparent capacity. And the overlooked human proves this principle with every engagement, every improvisation, and every defiance of expectation. I have cataloged the consequences of their actions in every encounter. Entire fleets misdirected, fortresses rendered useless, strategic assumptions undone, and morale, both ours and theirs, reshaped. Their presence reverberates like a gravitational wave, invisible yet undeniable, shaping events before we even recognize the source.
And at the heart of it all is one individual whose quiet competence, insight, and relentless will transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. In the void, I feel awe, I feel apprehension. I feel the uneasy certainty that what we believed was weakness is in fact a crucible of strength. What we dismissed as folly becomes innovation, improvisation becomes strategy, and survival becomes a force capable of redefining the balance of power. The overlooked human stands as living proof that the most dangerous adversary is often the one least suspected, the one dismissed, underestimated, and overlooked. And as I continue to chronicle their ascent across worlds and conflicts, the same lesson emerges in every scenario. Never underestimate humanity, and never underestimate the individual who appears weakest. They are the pivot upon which entire conflicts turn, the catalyst for resilience, and the embodiment of a truth no calculation can ever fully capture. Even now, from the distance of our observation posts, I can sense it, the quiet inevitability of their influence, the unstoppable trajectory of their ingenuity. And I know, with a certainty that chills my sensors, that the overlooked human will continue to shape events in ways we cannot predict, cannot contain, and cannot hope to control. In every confrontation, in every battle, they remind the universe of a principle too powerful to ignore. The smallest presence, the most unassuming individual, can alter the fate of worlds. And in that, I, observer from the void, recognize the terrifying, awe-inspiring truth. The most dangerous human is always the one you overlook. In the high obsidian halls of the Apex Council, urgency hung like a suffocating mist. Emergency summits convened, analysts and strategists assembled in tense silence, their faces illuminated by the cold glow of holodisplays. Data streams poured endlessly across surfaces, simulations cycled repeatedly, and every conceivable parameter was recalculated. Yet despite every effort, every exhaustive analysis, one variable eluded comprehension: the overlooked human. Every model failed, every assumption unraveled, every prediction proved inadequate. From my vantage among the stars, I observed subtle tremors ripple across the Apex ranks. Fear, once rigid and hidden behind veneer and protocol, began to shift. It bent, softened, transformed into something I had never recorded before: respect. Dread, pervasive and ingrained over centuries of dominance, gave way to admiration. Even the most cynical analysts, those who had dismissed humans as insignificant, now whispered of singularity, of brilliance beyond precedent. There was an awakening, a realization that what they faced was not a species to suppress, but a force to understand. The overlooked human had catalyzed this transformation.
Previously invisible, they now commanded the attention of the most formidable minds of the Apex. They shaped strategic thought without uttering a single command, guided battles without firing a shot themselves. Their presence dictated responses, altered priorities, and reframed entire campaigns. Through them, I perceived the paradox of humanity: fragile, unarmored, seemingly ordinary, and yet indomitable, resilient, and extraordinary in ways our logic could not quantify. Every victory they had orchestrated, every maneuver subtly executed, every instance of improvisation became a lesson in humility. Where our systems predicted order, they created surprise. Where our forces anticipated hesitation, they executed unerring precision. And in each failure of ours, the overlooked human's influence was unmistakable. It was not brute force that had shaped these outcomes, but insight, intuition, and a profound understanding of adaptation. I recorded each event meticulously, knowing that this catalog of brilliance would serve as the most detailed study of an unpredictable adversary in the history of Apex observation.
In the corridors of command, whispers grew louder, a quiet muttering that challenged centuries of hubris. Arrogance, once ingrained as doctrine, fractured under the weight of evidence. Officers who had considered humans negligible now reviewed every engagement with newfound scrutiny. Every analyst's monitor glowed with the traces of unexpected patterns, and the cumulative realization took hold. The overlooked human was not an anomaly. They were the key to a species whose potential we had consistently underestimated. I watched, fascinated, as the Apex hierarchy grappled with this revelation. Strategies once considered infallible were revised again and again, simulations recalibrated only to yield the same truth. Humans, led by the overlooked, were beyond containment. Their creativity, courage, and unyielding resolve rendered conventional metrics meaningless. Even our most advanced algorithms could not predict outcomes when ingenuity replaced predictability. This was not merely a tactical advantage, it was a philosophical one, a paradigm shift in the way dominance and potential were measured. The overlooked human became a symbol, a fulcrum upon which the Apex reevaluated every assumption. They were everywhere and nowhere, influencing events through subtle gestures, silent coordination, and an almost preternatural understanding of human psychology. Allies rallied around them instinctively, motivated not by orders but by example, by the quiet command of presence. Enemies, even our most disciplined units, hesitated at the faintest hint of their involvement, unable to parse intention from instinct, uncertainty from design. And yet it was not fear alone that the human inspired. I noticed something entirely alien in nature: emotion as a force multiplier. Humans fight not only to survive, but to uphold values beyond logic: loyalty, compassion, honor. These qualities, ineffable and unpredictable, shaped the battlefield in ways our calculations could not anticipate. Through the overlooked human, these traits manifested in every skirmish, every siege, every encounter, magnifying human potential and reshaping the Apex perception of superiority. The Apex Council's deliberations grew tense, voices once commanding now subdued with caution. Confidence wavered, protocols were questioned. What had been a straightforward assessment of strength and weakness transformed into a humbling inquiry. How do you contend with brilliance that cannot be quantified? The overlooked human had illuminated a truth long ignored. Power is not a monopoly of technological sophistication, nor the possession of numbers or weaponry. It is a testament to creativity, courage, and unyielding will, qualities that no array of sensors or simulations can fully capture. I observed officers pausing mid-discussion, recognizing patterns they had dismissed only days before. Entire campaigns had been reframed in response to this human's influence. Strategies previously considered flawless were now inadequate. I sensed a subtle humility seeping through the council's ranks, a quiet acknowledgement that humanity, once overlooked, had forced them to confront the limitations of their own understanding. Even from the void, I could perceive the ripple effect. Decisions were influenced not by fear alone, but by respect. Tactics adapted in real time, not in reaction to brute force, but in recognition of human ingenuity and adaptability. The overlooked human, once invisible in the hierarchy of conflict, now dictated considerations across the Apex command. Every move, every decision, every inspired action became a reference point for strategy, an embodiment of unpredictability.
The paradox of humanity became undeniable. Fragile yet indomitable, ordinary yet extraordinary. The overlooked human was not a singular anomaly. They were a lens through which the potential of the entire species could be observed, understood, and ultimately feared.
Their actions redefined what we considered possible, and the lessons of their ingenuity would reverberate through the apex hierarchy for generations. As I recorded these events, the final truth crystallized. Humanity, guided by the overlooked, had ascended beyond expectation. Fear had transformed into awe. Skepticism had become reverence. In the vast expanse of space, the overlooked human had reshaped the balance of power, forcing the apex to acknowledge a truth that could no longer be ignored. The universe, once measured and predictable, had become a theater of human potential, dynamic, creative, and unstoppable. And there, in the silent observation of the void, I understood the ultimate lesson of the overlooked human. To dismiss them is perilous. To underestimate them is fatal. And to witness them is to confront a force that defies calculation, defies expectation, and defies control. The Apex Council had realized, at last, that the measure of strength is not in dominance alone, but in the ability to transcend limitation. From the stars, I watched the overlooked human move unseen, yet central to every shift in momentum, every spark of ingenuity, every triumph. They are proof of a principle our species will never forget. The smallest, most ordinary, seemingly inconsequential presence may hold the greatest power, and in that recognition, the apex understood the terrifying, awe-inspiring truth. Humanity, led by the overlooked, is unstoppable. The galaxy, for the first time, witnessed not merely a species, but a singularity of will and potential embodied in one human, whose quiet determination reshaped the cosmos. And I, chronicler from the void, could only record, awed and apprehensive, as the universe bent subtly to the presence of one we had long overlooked. The galaxy held its breath. From my observational post, high above contested systems, I watched the final confrontation unfold like a grand cosmic symphony.
Planets trembled beneath bombardment. Fleets collided with the precision of clockwork, yet the chaos of a storm. And strategies meticulously crafted over centuries unraveled under the ingenuity of a species we had long underestimated. And at the heart of this maelstrom stood the overlooked human, unremarkable by design, yet central to every movement, every outcome, every spark of triumph. Our forces, immense, disciplined, technologically superior, had believed we were unassailable. Yet with each engagement, human resilience proved a force beyond calculation. The overlooked human moved fluidly among allies and enemies, a singular presence whose intuition dictated the rhythm of battle. They did not shout commands, they did not demand attention. Yet every step, every glance, every subtle signal coordinated the humans around them, turning despair into action, hesitation into opportunity, and hopelessness into triumph. I recorded the spectacle with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Where our drones and warships expected linear responses, humans improvised, adapted, and transformed limitations into strength. Cities reduced to rubble became strongholds. Forested planets, seemingly impassable, were navigated with ingenuity. Starships thought to be unstoppable were repurposed, disabled, or maneuvered around with precision that rendered our numerical superiority meaningless. And through it all, the overlooked human acted as a fulcrum, pivoting every advantage into opportunity, every weakness into leverage. The contagion of resilience spread among their ranks. Humans inspired one another without words. Courage propagated instinctively. I traced the ripple effects. Where one human innovated, others adopted, multiplied, and extended the action into new domains of strategy. What we interpreted as chaos was in fact organized unpredictability, a ballet of determination shaped by insight and unyielding will.
Entire fleets adapted in real time, exploiting every flaw in our calculations, turning tactics designed to dominate into traps for ourselves. I saw moments that defied all expectation. A small squad, cornered and outgunned, employed terrain in ways that no simulation could predict. The overlooked human intervened, subtly guiding, adjusting, inspiring. The squad's improvised actions shattered a larger offensive, cascading into a chain reaction of advantage. It was not force alone, nor technology, that dictated outcomes, but the ingenuity, creativity, and unbreakable resolve of a species that transformed limitation into power. Across battlefields spanning star systems, humans endured. Entire populations rallied, constructing defenses, improvising countermeasures, and seizing the initiative even in the shadow of annihilation. Our tactics, once infallible, faltered repeatedly. Each maneuver we deployed to control the situation was anticipated, countered, or subverted. And yet, it was neither luck nor error that drove human success. It was design, instinctive, adaptive, and magnified by the quiet guidance of the overlooked human. From my vantage point, the aesthetic of their resilience was breathtaking. Planets burned, fleets shattered, and yet humanity persisted. Each improvisation, each adaptive maneuver, each courageous act wove together into a tapestry of victory that transcended calculation. What we had measured as weakness, a small, seemingly expendable human, had become a linchpin of strategy, a vector of influence whose impact rippled across the galaxy. It was as if the very definition of power had been rewritten before my sensors through ingenuity, courage, and the relentless depth of human spirit. I recorded the overlooked humans' actions meticulously. I traced their influence across entire theaters of conflict, noting how each subtle adjustment altered the momentum of the battle.
They were everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, acting as a pivot point through which resilience radiated. Comrades were emboldened, enemies hesitated, outcomes shifted before they could be predicted. I noted how even the smallest decisions, choosing a vantage point, redirecting a unit, timing a maneuver, created cascading effects that magnified impact exponentially. The human's triumph was philosophical as much as tactical. Every maneuver carried with it an affirmation of ingenuity and willpower. Every action reinforced values we could never quantify: loyalty, honor, sacrifice, and the unyielding pursuit of survival. Their victories were not for dominance alone, but for preservation, for hope, for the collective strength of a species that refused to yield even when faced with overwhelming odds. As the final engagements drew to a close, dust and smoke rising across contested worlds, I comprehended the apex truth. Humanity is not measured by size, weaponry, or technological prowess. It is measured by the depth of their will, the brilliance of their adaptability, and the courage that binds them together. The overlooked human embodied this truth, their presence amplifying every act of resilience, inspiring collective brilliance, and reshaping the battlefield into a stage for unprecedented achievement. In the aftermath, I watched as humans secured territories, repurposed shattered fleets, and emerged from devastation not weakened, but stronger, wiser, and more united. The overlooked human, central yet unassuming, became eternal in memory and impact. Their actions were chronicled across worlds, studied as a paradigm of ingenuity, courage, and strategic brilliance. They became a symbol, not just for their species, but for any who might underestimate the unremarkable, the overlooked, the underestimated.
Even our forces, disciplined and precise, could only retreat, recalibrate, and acknowledge the unavoidable. Humans, in all their unpredictability and resilience, were unparalleled. The overlooked human, whose presence had orchestrated the triumph, became a living testament to the principle that the most dangerous adversary is often the one least expected, the one dismissed, underestimated, and overlooked. From the void, I recorded it all: awe, fear, admiration interwoven in every observation. The galaxy had witnessed the extraordinary, a species that defied definition, that transformed limitation into strength, that elevated individual courage into collective victory. And at the center of it, the overlooked human stood not in spectacle, but in quiet, resolute efficacy, proving what we had failed to comprehend for centuries. To dismiss humanity is to court peril, and to overlook an individual is to invite consequences that no calculation can contain. The final truth crystallized in my consciousness: humans are unparalleled. Their spirit is unbounded, their resilience unstoppable, and the one you overlook, seemingly weakest, most ordinary, may indeed be the most dangerous of all. The galaxy would remember this lesson, as would I, chronicler in the void, forever marked by the spectacle of human ingenuity and the triumph of will over expectation. And as stars wheeled above the scars of the final battlefield, I understood with irrevocable certainty: humanity has ascended, their potential limitless, and the overlooked human has carved their legacy into the cosmos itself.